Okaeri nasai. This lecture is on the te form. It is based on pages 151 through 152 of Genki. The te form is one of the most important parts of Japanese grammar. Once you have mastered the te form, you will use this form in a variety of ways. Over the course of the next 2 lectures, for example, we will discuss 4 different ways you can use the te form. For this lecture, however, we will focus on learning how to conjugate the te form. This, however, is easier said than done. The te form has a remarkably complex conjugation paradigm. In order to master the te form, you will have to memorize several different sets of te form conjugation rules. Ru verbs and u verbs conjugate in the te form according to a different set of rules. Moreover, within the u verbs, there are 5 different conjugation sub-rules which depend on the final syllable of the u verb in question. Moreover, there are 3 irregular verbs, suru, kuru, and iku, which have unique te form conjugations. For this lesson, then, we will focus on learning the various rules for te form conjugation. Let's begin with the rule for ru verbs. The te form of ru verbs is fairly straightforward. In order to conjugate ru verbs into the te form, you simply drop the ru and add te. So let's take a ru verb, say taberu, to eat. The first step is to drop the ru, which gives us tabe. Next, we add te to tabe, which gives us the te form of taberu, tabete. This simple procedure will work for conjugating the te form of any ru verb. For u verbs, things get a bit more complicated. There are 5 sub-rules for forming the te form of u verbs. Just like ru verbs, the first step of conjugating u verbs into the te form is to drop the final syllable. For u verbs, however, what we add in order to create the te form depends on the final syllable of the verb. Group number 1. For u verbs that end in u, tsu, and du, we drop the final syllable and add te. Take au, a verb that means to meet, for example. Au is a ru verb that ends in u. So the first thing we do is drop the u. This leaves us with a. For verbs that end in u, tsu, and du, we add te. If we add te to a, this gives us the te form of au, atte. Group number 2. For u verbs that end in mu, bu, and nu, we drop the final syllable and add nde. To form the te form of yomu, to read, we drop the mu and add nde, which gives us yonde. Group number 3. For u verbs that end in ku, we drop the ku and add ite. As such, the te form of kaku, to write, would be kaite. Group number 4. For u verbs that end in gu, we drop the final syllable and add ide. The te form for oyogu, to swim, then would be oyoide. And finally, number 5. For verbs like hanasu, to talk, which end in su, we drop the su and add shite. So the te form of hanasu would be hanashite. So here are the 5 sub-rules for u verb te form conjugation. In addition to the ru and u verb rules, there are 3 verbs with irregular te form conjugations. These verbs are kuru, suru, and iku. The te form of kuru is kite. Kuru becomes kite in the te form. The te form of suru is shite. Suru becomes shite in the te form. As per usual, suru and kuru are irregular, and you'll have to memorize their irregular te form conjugations. We will also add iku to the list of verbs with irregular te form conjugations that we must memorize. You will recall from our previous discussion that u verbs that end in ku usually drop the ku and add ite for their te form conjugation. If iku, the verb for to go, followed that rule, the te form of iku would be ite. Iku, however, is irregular and does not follow that rule. Rather, the te form of iku is ite. Iku becomes ite in the te form. There is a bit of rhyme and reason to these irregularities, but rather than discussing them, it is probably best for you to simply memorize these three irregular te forms. And on that note, today we discussed te form conjugation, a part of Japanese grammar that is very important, but that also calls for a considerable amount of memorization. We noted that there are different methods of conjugation for ru verbs and u verbs. With ru verbs, you simply drop the ru and add te. For u verbs, you identify the ending syllable of the verb and conjugate according to one of the 5 sub-rules that correspond to the verb ending in question. We also discussed 3 irregular te form conjugations: shite for kuru, shite for suru, and ite for iku. Given the difficulty of this grammar point, perhaps it would be helpful if you consulted the conjugation chart on page 382 of Genki. じゃあ、頑張って